Most in the US would agree that free, fair, and representative elections are the goal of our democracy. That when someone is elected to the highest office, the presidency, they are selected by the majority of Americans who believe in their competency and direction for the nation. Unfortunately, our electoral system is outdated and flawed. The three major problems are the Electoral College, the lack of a national holiday for national elections, and the two-party system. The Electoral College is a peculiar instrument that is unique to few countries. Basically, voters cast votes for candidates, but those votes actually go toward electing a slate of electors whose duty it is to cast their vote for the candidates chosen by those they represent. This means that a Republican voter in deep blue California has gone their entire lives casting votes that don't even count toward anything, with the same being true for Democratic voters in Texas. This becomes a problem when states whose electors have cast their votes make hundreds of thousands or even millions of votes essentially meaningless. Consider the 2016 elections, where the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, but lost by 77 Electoral College votes. Or the 2000 election, where the runner-up, Al Gore, lost by 5 Electoral College votes, yet secured over 500,000 more votes than the winner, George W. Bush. The Electoral College unfairly distributes the power that votes have, not only by invalidating votes of deep red or deep blue states, but also by ensuring battleground states are pandered and campaigned to the most. But even in a battleground state, the second challenge you face is actually voting in the first place. Quote from Britannica, "The US ranks 31st out of 50 for voter turnout among Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD countries. In the 2020 presidential election, 62.8% of the American voting age population cast a ballot. By comparison, Uruguay reported the highest OECD voter turnout of 94.9% in the most recent national election. Turkey came second with 89%. The US voter turnout is fairly low, making our elections less representative of the population, especially since, according to the same Britannica article, lower income individuals are far less likely to vote. This means that middle and upper class Americans are unfairly represented. Lower income families usually find it difficult to make time to go out and actually vote. But if Election Day were a federal holiday, then it would be far more likely that individuals with conflicting schedules would be given time off to exercise their democratic rights. It would also turn the election day into a celebration of our rights, rather than a chore to struggle to complete in time. Quoting again from Britannica, Pew Research Center found that 71% of Democrats and 59% of Republicans support making Election Day a federal holiday. Another survey showed that U.S. adults would rather have a federal holiday on Election Day than on Christmas Eve, the Friday after Thanksgiving, or St. Patrick's Day. The majority support this decision too. It's time to make it happen. Finally, the two-party system is woefully inadequate to truly represent the diversity of thought in this nation. Every few years, Americans pick between candidates of two parties who frankly are not that different from each other. Both Republicans and Democrats support similar foreign policy, considering bipartisan issues like anti-Chinese government sentiment and the Israel-Palestine conflict, just to name recent issues, and our neoliberal pro-market economy. The two parties have the impossible task of trying to represent more than 300 million Americans, and each American has the impossible task of trying to figure out which of their beliefs are most important in order to align with a particular party. The problem is that third parties don't have nearly the same funding or historical backing, giving them all an impossible uphill battle. If instead nationally televised debates were held which gave candidates from the top 5 or 6 parties equal airtime, Americans could truly choose the candidate and party which best suited their conviction. There isn't a definite answer, but reform is most certainly required to give more legitimacy and even the playing field, so to speak. To conclude, the U.S. electoral system is massively flawed, with elections being won by candidates who receive less votes than others, same votes being worth more than others, a lack of national holidays stifling voter turnout, and the two-party system being a poor fit for the diversity of political opinions of the United States.
Hi everyone, I'm Carly, and for this week's debate, I'm going to be arguing that our electoral system is working just fine and does not need to be overhauled. Let's dive into my position, but first a disclaimer. I am arguing this position because I chose it for this debate, but it's not how I really feel. I'm trying to do this side justice, however, so let's get to it. First, we heard Ruben argue that voting should be a national holiday so that more people would vote, but I really doubt that many more people will use this holiday as a day to vote instead of a day to just have off of work. I have to say that I feel as if it's pretty easy for people to vote already, but people still choose not to. Voting is usually held at very accessible places for many people. They made it an easy process to register to vote, but people still find ways to avoid it. We also have lots of opportunities to vote early, so there are weeks and weeks when people can fit voting in right now. But I think this point also requires us to take a step back and ask, do we really want every single person, no matter how much they've been paying attention, to vote? I personally believe that only people who are very serious about voting and know what's going on in the country should be the ones to vote. If you really wanted to get your vote in and have your voice heard, then you'll usually find a way. One statistic I saw recently shows how uninformed average citizens are about things like government spending. According to an article from the Associated Press, on average, Americans say spending on foreign aid makes up 31% of the federal budget, rather than the actual answer, closer to 1% or less. The article also points out that 7 out of 10 Americans say that we are giving too much money to other countries. If we understand that most citizens aren't very knowledgeable about actual policies, then I think it's hard to argue that everyone should be voting. I don't think we need to make every election day a national holiday, because it's just giving people more of a chance to stay home and avoid voting or show up to vote about things they don't really know about. Secondly, the Electoral College. Many people would argue that the Electoral College is broken, but I think it's working the way it was designed to work by the framers of the Constitution. The Electoral College and our indirect election of the president is what the framers intended when they outlined the process of the Electoral College in Article 2, Section 1. According to the National Archives website, the Electoral College was, in part, as a compromise between the election of the president by a vote in Congress and election of the president by a popular vote of qualified citizens. At the Constitutional Convention, the topic of how to select the president was debated for months, and it ended up as the solution that made both sides happy enough to move forward. Even then, many of the framers were worried about the ability of average citizens to choose the president. They thought people wouldn't have enough information to know which candidate to vote for. From the very start, the Electoral College was supposed to balance the people's votes with the voice of electors. This is what happens today, and it almost always works just fine. There have only been 5 times that the Electoral College winner didn't win the popular vote. 53 out of 58 presidential elections saw the popular vote winner also win the Electoral College. That's why I think the Electoral College works for the most part, and we do not need to change it. Finally, one might argue that having only 2 parties to choose from is just not enough. But I think that if we had more than 2 parties, there would be so many different interests and opinions that nothing could actually get done. No one group can have enough control, and so multiple people would be attempting to run the country at the same time, and there would be too much division of power. This will become a big mess, and so much less will get done. Our 2 political parties work out well enough and can work together to serve the majority and minority well without breaking up into too many pieces. That was my side. Thank you.
Hi, today I'm going to be talking about ranked choice voting. What is ranked choice voting? It's a system that's gaining attention in elections across the US. It's not like regular voting where you just pick a candidate. RCV allows voters to rank candidates according to preference. Here's how it works. Voters rank their candidates, their first, second choice, so on. If a candidate gets more than 50% for first choice, that's the winner. If no one gets a majority, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Those votes then go on to the next ranked candidate on those ballots. This process repeats until one candidate has the majority. Places like Maine and Alaska use this in statewide elections, while places like San Francisco and New York use it for local races. Some states prohibit it altogether. Why do people not support this? It can be confusing for some voters, and some argue it violates the principle of one person, one vote, since not everyone ranks all candidates. Why do people support it? It ensures a candidate wins with a majority, not just plurality. It reduces the spoiler effect, which is when a third-party candidate takes away votes from a similar candidate. In the end, ranked choice voting is a different way to approach elections, with both benefits and challenges. More places are considering using it, and it's important to understand how it works and how it could better our democracy. Thank you.